My parents transferred the family shop to my sister's husband. That sentence burned behind my eyes as I stood alone under the flickering lights, oil still on my hands. 10 years of 80-hour weeks gone. Everyone expected me to fight, to shout, to beg. I didn't. I washed my hands, hung my apron, and walked into the snow without a word. They thought I'd finally broken. But a week later, when Dad called panicked about our biggest client leaving, I answered calmly. Let the air handle it. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of someone reclaiming everything they were owed. When I was 22, my father, Daniel Rowan, handed me a pair of safety goggles and said, "This is your inheritance, learn to earn it." That was 10 years ago. Since then, I've spent most of my life under the white buzz of factory lights, surrounded by the hum of machines older than I am. I ran the first shift, the night shift, and sometimes both. My fingerprints were etched into every control panel in that shop. The building smelled like metal and burnt oil. In winter, our breath fogged inside. In summer, the air shimmered with heat. Still, I loved it. I thought I was protecting something my grandfather Arthur Rowan had built with his own hands back in 1970, a legacy of precision, sweat, and pride. He used to tell me steel remembers the hands that shape it. My mother Margaret was gentle but always deferred to Dad. She'd bring lunch sometimes, leave it on the counter, and tell me to keep your head down. Your father just wants the best for you. My older sister Jenna was the opposite. She preferred glossy offices and conference calls. She married Mason Pierce, a self-proclaimed business strategist who wore polished shoes in a place where the floor never stayed clean. When Mason joined the company to modernize operations, my father introduced him as the future of Rowan Metalworks. I smiled and shook Mason's hand still in my grease-stained gloves. His grip was soft. At first, it didn't bother me. I believed in the long game. I believed my family saw the hours, the burns, the late-night repairs no one else would do. I believed loyalty had a weight that couldn't be ignored, but small things started to shift. Mason began taking pictures beside the machines, posting captions like, "Proud to lead our talented team into the next era." My father shared every post. My mother commented with hearts. No one tagged me. Then came the new truck for Mason Company issued spotless custom detailed. Dad said he needs reliable transport for client visits. I still drove the 20-year-old pickup that coughed in second gear. One evening as I shut down the mills, Mason walked by in his pressed shirt scrolling on his phone. He looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "Don't stay too late. Optics matter." He left before I could answer. I remember staring at the red digital readout of the CNC machine, thinking how numbers never lied. They did what you told them to do. Humans were different. By the time the first snow fell that year, I'd started counting what wasn't said. The silence at dinner, the missing thank yous, the quiet shifts in power that no one wanted to name. And somewhere under the constant hum of the machines, I began to hear something else. Something breaking. It was around March when Mason's presence stopped feeling temporary. His name started showing up in company emails not as marketing consultant, but as operations director. I noticed it one morning while reviewing Blueprint's 3 signatures on the approval line, mine, Dad's, and his. That was the first time I felt the ground tilt beneath me. At meetings, Dad turned to him before anyone else. "Mason, what's your take?" The same man who couldn't tell a feed rate from a speed rate cleared his throat and said, "Efficiency. We need to move from craft to brand." Everyone nodded like it meant something. My mother started repeating Mason's phrases at dinner. "Your father says Mason's bringing vision." I asked, "Vision for what?" She hesitated. "Growth, honey. The kind you can't see yet." I smiled tightly and went back to cutting my food. Then there were the photos. Mason loved being photographed. Every week he'd post a new shot in the shop standing beside a lathe I maintained, captioned with something like, "Innovation never sleeps." My father would share it, writing, "Proud of our leadership team." One night I scrolled through the feed and froze. There it was, Mason standing in front of my workstation, the one my grandfather built by hand, with the caption, "Continuing the Rowan legacy." My stomach turned, not because of the lie, but because of how easily everyone believed it. A few weeks later, Dad gathered the team for a strategy meeting. I wiped my hands, still warm from the mill, and joined. Mason had printed slides with bullet points that looked suspiciously like my notes from the week before. He started explaining his plan to restructure production flow down to the exact phrasing I'd written. Dad nodded, impressed. That's leadership, son. I looked up, certain I'd misheard. Son Mason grinned. We're all family here, right? That word, family, landed like grit in a wound. After the meeting, I stayed late recalibrating the machine just to hear something honest. Hank Doyle, the old machinist who'd been here since Grandpa's day, stopped by my station. His beard smelled faintly of tobacco and steel dust. He said quietly, "Your granddad used to say a machine runs like the hands that feed it. These days, the hands don't touch much." I asked if he ever regretted staying. He chuckled, eyes soft. Never. Because I know what I built. That line stuck with me all week. By summer, Mason had his own office. I still worked on the floor. When I asked about payroll after 10 years of reinvesting my share, Dad said, "Everything's tied up in assets, Kelsey. You know that. Don't worry, it's all yours one day." That phrase again. One day. Except one day never came. The cracks had become visible now. Orders, delayed invoices, misfiled clients calling me directly to fix Mason's oversights. I'd clean up the mess quietly, hand him the final results, and watch him take credit again. The last straw came in late November. Titan Steel Dynamics sent a thank you card addressed to Mr. Pierce for the precision parts I had machined. When I showed it to my father, he smiled. "Well, that's good PR for the company." I nodded slowly. "Sure. For the company." That was the night I stopped believing this was a misunderstanding. The night it all broke open was colder than usual. The factory floor was empty, the hum of the machines replaced by a faint echo of dripping coolant. I was alone finishing quality checks on a late order. My hands were black with grease when I reached for a binder that had slipped behind a drawer. That's when I saw it, a red folder stamped "Confidential." It didn't belong there. I hesitated. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a client document or tax record. But something in me already knew. I wiped my hands on a rag, opened it carefully, and started reading. Transfers. Ownership. Effective date 4 months earlier. Signatures Daniel Rowan and Margaret Rowan. New majority owner Mason Pierce. My name appeared once under employee list. I read it twice then, a third time, hoping I'd misread. The ink glared back sharp and final. 10 years of labor, every hour, every scar erased with one stroke of a pen. My throat tightened, but no sound came out. I sank onto the stool beside the CNC mill and stared at my hands that had built, fixed, and fed this place since I was barely out of college. They looked foreign now, used, disposable. I thought of my grandfather's voice. Steel remembers the hands that shape it. Apparently, people didn't. When the shock passed, a strange calm took its place. I slid the papers back into the folder, straightened the stack, and shut the drawer. Then I stood up, turned off each machine one by one, listening as the noise died, leaving only silence. Before I left, I wrote one short letter on company stationery. Effective immediately, I resign. Good luck running this place without me. I placed it on my father's desk right beside his brass nameplate. Then I took the only things that truly belonged to me, my tool notebook, a photo of Grandpa Arthur holding my hand by the first mill, and his old welding gloves. Outside, the parking lot was crusted with frost. My truck coughed before the engine caught. I looked through the windshield at the building's glow behind me. The red Rowan Metal Works sign flickered like it couldn't decide if it still worked. As I drove off, I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just whispered, "I tried Grandpa." For the next week, I stayed in the small apartment above Tori Alvarez's bakery. She didn't ask questions, just left coffee and a warm roll on the counter each morning. I woke up at 5 out of habit, stared at my idle hands, and tried to breathe through the silence. On the 8th day, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number until I heard my father's voice, strained, panicked. "Kelsey Titan Steel Dynamics is about to walk. Mason can't fix the order. Please, we need you back." I took a slow breath. "Dad," I said softly, "let the air handle it." Dad didn't speak at first, just a long silence on the line, the sound of his breath heavy like he was trying to decide whether to beg or command. When he finally did, his voice cracked. "Kelsey, please." Mason doesn't understand the specs. Titan says the parts are out of tolerance. They're threatening to terminate the contract. That's 40% of our revenue. For a second, muscle memory tried to take over. My mind pictured the mill setup. The tool offsets the coolant ratios. I could fix it in hours. I knew I could. But the moment I almost reached for my jacket, I saw that red folder again in my head. The signatures, the betrayal. I don't work there anymore, I said quietly. You don't mean that. His voice broke higher. Your family. No, Dad, I said. I was labor. You already chose your family. He exhaled sharply, half pain, half anger. Don't do this, Kelsey. I'm not doing anything I said. I stopped doing things for free. And I hung up. The phone buzzed again and again for the next hour. I didn't answer. I just sat in the small kitchen staring at my calloused hands in the quiet satisfaction of doing nothing for once. That was the first time silence ever felt powerful. Over the next few days, the calls stopped, but messages trickled in from old coworkers, questions, warnings, gossip. Mason's been missing meetings. Titan pulled the inspection team. Your dad looks sick. Tori slid a cup of coffee across the counter one morning and said, You gonna let them drown? I looked up from the newspaper. They built the boat. They chose the captain. But I didn't walk away completely. I started keeping track. Titan Steel filed a complaint over defective batches. Vendors posted delayed payment notices. Mason was suddenly posting fewer photos online. Then one afternoon, I got an email from Nora Park, an old friend from my technical college days who'd gone on to law school. Subject line, need to talk. When we met at her Milwaukee office, she looked exactly the same sharp, composed the kind of woman who always walked in knowing the next 3 moves. She poured coffee and said I heard about the transfer. You heard right, I replied. She leaned back, scanning the printouts I'd brought, the red folder copies of production reports, client emails, and a stack of unpaid tax notices I'd saved before leaving. After a while, she said, Kelsey, this isn't just betrayal. It's grounds for reversal. Your grandfather's documented philosophy, whoever builds with their hands and mind owns a piece of its soul, that's founder intent. Courts respect that. And if we can show Mason's mismanagement and misuse of company funds, we've got a case. For the first time in months, I felt something besides anger clarity. The following weeks blurred into long nights at Nora's office. We combed through records, lined up every invoice and email like evidence on a factory floor. I found messages from Titan Steel praising my precision, thanking me for saving critical orders. I found spreadsheets showing the company's revenue rising 180% under my technical oversight and crashing after Mason's arrival. Then came the proof we needed most. Mason's company card statements, thousands spent on client dinners during Packers games, a $4 $800 office equipment charge that turned out to be a home theater system delivered to his address. Nora looked at me and smiled thinly. He's a walking audit. We also contacted Hank Doyle, the old machinist. He met us at a diner, his hands still marked with grease stains that never really washed off. He brought a folder of old contracts from Grandpa Arthur's time annotated in his handwriting. Words circled, underlined, team share, joint ownership, collective value. He meant it. Kelsey, Hank said, Arthur always said you'd carry this place forward. When I took those papers back to Nora, she said, This is gold. It's not just about fairness anymore. It's about legal intent. She looked up from the files. Are you ready to face them? I thought of my father's trembling voice, my mother's silence, Mason's smug grin beside the machines. Then I nodded. Yes, but not as their daughter. As the one who actually built it. The courtroom in Green Bay smelled of old carpet and cold coffee. The walls were pale, the lighting unforgiving. My parents sat on one side with Mason, his lawyer, whispering fast in his ear. I sat beside Nora, steady, composed. When the judge entered the room, hushed, Nora began with calm precision. Your Honor, this is not a case about inheritance. It's about integrity. It's about a woman who gave 10 years of her life to a business her grandfather built only to be erased for the sake of image. She projected my grandfather's handwritten line onto the screen. Whoever builds with their hands and mind owns a piece of its soul. Then came the evidence client emails with my name production data showing the company's growth, and finally the list of Mason's business expenses. Each number landed like a hammer strike. When Nora called me to the stand, my palms were cold, but my voice didn't shake. I described the years I worked 80-hour weeks, no pay, every burn, and scar proof of commitment. I said I believed I was earning a future. I didn't realize I was building someone else's image. When it was Mason's turn, his lawyer tried to steer him gently. "Mr. Pierce, could you explain your leadership contributions?" Mason smiled. "I modernized the brand. I brought visibility." Nora rose. "Cross-examination, Your Honor." She walked closer, her heels tapping the tile like a metronome. "Mr. Pierce, name 3 clients you personally acquired." He blinked. I oversaw general outreach. Name 1. He hesitated. "I'd have to check the database." "All right, describe how to set up a CNC mill for a titanium run." He frowned. "That's not my area of focus." Nora turned to the judge. "He owns a machining company, Your Honor." The gallery murmured. My father rubbed his forehead. My mother's eyes dropped to her lap. Nora continued. "Mr. Pierce, what was last quarter's revenue?" He swallowed, not sure of the exact number. "So, to summarize," she said calmly, "you can't name your clients, don't understand your product, and don't know your financials, but you call yourself a leader." Silence stretched across the room. The judge looked over his glasses at Mason. "You may sit down, Mr. Pierce." I watched the confidence drain from his face like oil from a cracked line. When the closing statements ended, the judge leaned back reading over the files. "This court recognizes clear evidence that the transfer of ownership violated the founder's documented intent, and that the plaintiff, Ms. Kelsey Rowan, was the primary operational force behind the company's success. Conversely, Mr. Pierce's financial misconduct disqualifies him as a responsible successor." He paused. "The transfer is hereby nullified. The company will be liquidated and the remaining proceeds divided equally between Ms. Kelsey Rowan and Ms. Jenna Pierce." A gavel struck. Final. My father's shoulders slumped. My mother looked years older. Mason sat frozen eyes blank. Nora leaned toward me and whispered, "You won." But I didn't smile. Winning didn't feel like triumph. It felt like clean air after years of smoke. Outside, the sky was pale and cold. I stood on the courthouse steps, watching my breath rise like steam and fade. For the first time in my life, I wasn't attached to the hum of a machine or the weight of family duty. I was just free. Justice hadn't roared, it had whispered, and that whisper was louder than anything they'd ever said. 2 months later, the settlement money appeared in my account, $62,700 after debts and legal fees. It wasn't wealth, it was oxygen. Enough to breathe to begin again. I rented a small industrial space on the south edge of Green Bay, bare concrete floors, cracked windows, an echo that felt like possibility. I scrubbed the walls myself, repainted the doors, and installed 2 used CNC mills I bought from an auction. I named the place Rowan Steel Core. I didn't want to resurrect what was lost. I wanted to rebuild it on truth. At dawn, when the first spindle came to life, the sound made my chest ache. It was the same hum I'd grown up with, but this time it belonged to me. One afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID read Titan Steel Dynamics. A familiar voice said, "We heard you opened your own shop. We'd like you to take over production again. We need someone who actually knows the machines." I smiled steady. "Send me the specs." By summer, the machines were running full shifts. The invoices bore my name. The work was mine, the mistakes mine, the victories mine. One day, Hank stopped by his beard, whiter now, eyes bright. He ran his hand along the old mill I'd restored my grandfather's first. "Arthur would have been proud," he said softly. I nodded. "Maybe. But I'm proud for both of us." He smiled. "That's how legacy really works, kid. You don't inherit it, you rebuild it." When he left, I stood in the quiet, the hum of metal cutting through metal filling the air. The machine sounded steady, alive. And for the first time in years, so did I. The sun cut through the shop windows that morning, turning the metal dust in the air into gold. I leaned against the railing, watching the light fall across the machine my grandfather once called the heart of this place. Its rhythm was steady again. People always think revenge means shouting lawsuits or slammed doors. but sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes it's standing in the same place they tried to erase you from and realizing you're the only one still standing. I touched the cold steel, the pulse of my own work echoing back through it. Sometimes I said softly, "Silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of someone reclaiming everything they were owed. If you've ever been silenced and stood back up, this story was for you."